With this lesson, we're going to take that first step in being able to solo and improvise with relative scales on guitar. And with relative scales, not only can you harmonize various moods within a solo, you can also begin to cover a wider span of the fretboard by connecting box patterns that we've already covered with previous lessons. So with that, we're now going to start to focus on harmonizing major and minor scales with a step-by-step approach. Now, before working with relative scales, you should have some experience already with each individual scale, meaning the major and minor scales, playing riffs and knowing the standard box patterns of each scale. That also includes working on basic phrasing technique and playing with backing rhythms, again with each individual scale. And we've already covered that with previous lessons, so if you want, you can review those before we continue on. Otherwise, we're going to get started right now with harmonizing major and minor scales. Now, for this initial lesson on relative scales, we're only going to focus on using the standard box pattern of each scale. We're going to look at it from a sort of a general approach from a guitarist's perspective. And the very first thing to know is that the major scale box pattern will always be located 3 frets higher than its relative minor scale box pattern. So for example, if you're playing C major with the standard box pattern along the 8th fret position, the relative minor box pattern will be located 3 frets lower on the 5th fret, and that would be A minor. A good analogy is baseball. If you're familiar with baseball, the major leagues are always higher than the minor leagues. Same thing goes from the perspective of box patterns, at least the standard ones. The standard major scale box pattern will always be 3 frets higher than its relative minor box pattern. Now, if you look at these two box patterns, they actually fit together. If you look at the bottom of the A minor box pattern, which is along the 8th fret position, you'll see that it's identical to the top of the C major scale box pattern along the same 8th fret position. And these two patterns combine to form one larger connected box pattern that covers a span of 5 frets. So like I mentioned earlier, understanding relative scales is going to help expand how you can sort of navigate on the fretboard. And you can apply this connected pattern to any key. The first step with harmonizing these scales is to alternate between major scale riffs and minor scale riffs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take riffs from previous lessons and we're going to review and rehearse those riffs. And that's going to set you up for playing later on in the lesson with some backing tracks. We're going to start with a riff in A minor, so we're going to go to that box pattern along the 5th fret position. And this is a riff from a previous lesson that we've done called the minor scale riff. And now we're going to shift now to C major, box pattern along the 8th fret position. This is a riff that we've done in a previous lesson. It's called the low strings riff. Then we're going to shift back down to the minor scale. We're going to play the standard box pattern. Followed by a hammer riff. And then the low strings riff. And then we're going to alternate or shift back to the major scale box pattern with the riff that we initially introduced as the major scale riff. In the next clip, you're going to hear how both the A minor and C major riffs we just covered will harmonize together when played over a backing track in the key of A minor. Now, the key of A minor is related to the key of C major, and that applies both to relative scales as well as relative chord structures. So in this rhythm track, you're going to hear also major chords played along with minor chords. And the whole point, I would suggest as a first step, is to simply kick back and listen to the track and just hear how everything goes together. The next step is to see if you can follow along or play along with the riffs without going out of key. And that might be a little bit of a challenge initially because the rhythm, the backing rhythm, tends to throw off your concentration when you're playing new riffs. So once you can keep up with the track and follow the riffs, you'll be ready for the next step. Now hopefully in the previous clip you heard how it works with relative scales. They do harmonize together. Not only that, they can harmonize over different combinations of major and minor chords. At points in the previous progression, you were harmonizing a minor scale riff over a major chord, and vice versa, a major scale riff over a minor chord. And we didn't do that in previous lessons. In previous lessons, we intentionally synced up minor scale riffs with minor chord progressions. That way, you could associate that sad, serious mood with the minor scale. Same with the major scale. A major scale played over a major progression, you get a pure, happy, relaxing sound. Well, now we're taking the edge off the pure, sad, serious sound of the minor scale and the pure, happy, relaxing sound of the major scale. When you play a major scale riff over a minor chord, it produces a different mood. And that's the whole point of this lesson. We want to get you acclimated to hearing how these scales harmonize over different chords. In the next clip, we're going to still harmonize major and minor riffs, but this time it's going to be over a rhythm progression in the key of C major. We're going to play the same A minor and C major riffs, but we're going to rearrange the running order of riffs, and also the running order of chords, or the chord sequence, will be changed as well. So even though we're still harmonizing major and minor riffs, we're going to hear them in different combinations. One thing we're going to change is we're going to substitute, instead of the minor box pattern, we're going to play a riff with the major box pattern, just an ascending pattern here. And since we are in the key of C major, we're going to end on a strum C chord. So with that, we want a harmonized ending. We want to play a C root note to land on that final strum chord. For the next and final clip of this lesson, we're going to present you with two new challenges. The first one is going to be to try to harmonize riffs in different keys. As we mentioned earlier, the connected box pattern is movable. Therefore, so are all the riffs we covered. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift everything up 2 frets to the key of B minor along the 7th fret position. And the relative major scale will be 3 frets higher, D major along the 10th fret position. Now the second challenge is with this rhythm track there will be no guide riffs. In other words, it's just going to be the rhythm guitar. We're going to post on the screen some of the riffs we covered to give you a reminder for some options. But the challenge with the last clip is to have you work on different combinations on your own. And as long as you stay in key, you'll harmonize at any point of the progression. And again, that's the whole point of this lesson, is to simply get acclimated to the connected box pattern and just hear how major and minor riffs harmonize together. There's a lot more to cover with relative scales in future lessons, but if you can follow this final challenge with the last clip, you'll be ready for the next step.